Hello again, everybody. This is Rocket Rick J18, and today I'm going to talk to you about my 1955 Bowman set. And I always say my set because I'm looking at the cards that I collected, so that's what makes it my set, I think. And it would be disingenuous to just talk about the 55 Bowman baseball cards without admitting that that the ones that I looked at are not as pretty and pristine as some of the ones that other people could. But I'm happy to have these cards, and so that's what I'm going to talk about. The 1955 set has some interesting features to it. Number one, it's the first 64 cards in the set are sort of an ash blonde edge as opposed to a dark brown finish as they are on the rest of the cards. That is to say, cards number 65 through 320. Let's see here. 320, yeah, with some variations and errors and so forth. So a lot of people don't like the ash color on the outside and prefer it to be the lighter color to be on the inside of the border of the television set. They do obviously try to evoke the idea of color TV, which was a brand new thing in 1955. So they were trying to, indicate the modern nature of the Bowman issue, and glad to have that. There are a number of other anomalies in the set. For example, there are 31 umpire cards, which is about almost exactly. There are a number of big cards from the 50s that are present, including Mickey Mantle, second-year cards of Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, and Ernie Banks. Missing, however, are Harmon Killebrew, Roberto Clemente, Sandy Koufax, Pee Wee Reese, Roy Campanella, and Whitey Ford. So it's interesting for who is omitted. It's also interesting for who is included. This is the second year that Bowman had an exclusive arrangement with Mickey Mantle, and of course it would be the last because as the season was over, Topps would acquire Bowman for very little money, and as Bowman was essentially bankrupt and unable to continue. There are also some manager and coach cards, and I think they're, of course, very interesting. And let's see, what else can I point out to you? In the umpire cards, I would like to mention there are a number of umpire cards, umpires that are cards of umpires who are in the Hall of Fame, including Jim Honachek, Nestor Shylock, Al Barlick. Pretty. I'm not, wouldn't be aware of any other sets that would have umpires in them as a regular card. uh, at least playing days. Now, the play ball sets before the war did have a couple of umpires. Dolly Stark, certainly one example. I think maybe there might have been another one or two. But generally speaking, the umpires didn't get a lot of love. So, I'll tell you what, this is a set that does not lend itself to being photographed um, for YouTube purposes. Let's see if I can self-center it a little bit better. Because it is uh, the cards go in 8-pocket sleeves because they're still the larger vintage size, but they are horizontally presented so that you can't fit a whole sheet on the screen with the horizontal format of the camera. So it's really kind of a nuisance. And what I'm going to have to do is film them 4 at a time. Now, fortunately, because of the horizontal formats, they are mounted in such a way that card number 1 is in the top left-hand corner, card number 2 is in the top right-hand corner, then 3 is next on the left side, and 4 on the right side, and so on throughout the set. So when I show you the top 4 cards on page 1, those are going to be card numbers 1, 2, 3, and 4. I will mention that among the interesting errors, there are 2 cards, or 2 sets of 2 cards, of 2 players each, of Milt and Frank Bowling, and Ernie and Don Johnson. And they have reversed the backs of the cards so that on the front you'll see a picture of, say, Ernie Johnson. On the back it's going to say Don Johnson and have his statistics and numbers. And that's a pretty unique error. It's not that you don't have wrong backs, but that they would be paired like that. There's also an error of Harvey Keene's card that has his name misspelled. And there are the usual dates and, hits and at-bats and so forth that, are off by a little bit. I have some of those cards, but not all of them. It doesn't thrill me to have an error card that says 109 RBIs instead of 108. So I can't see paying. It's like having an error on a checklist. It's okay if it's $1. It's not okay if it's $50. So that's my collecting philosophy on the error cards. Well, with all that in mind, let's take a look at some cards. And we do that by casting gaze of the camera. Okay. So as I said, these are cards numbers 1 through 4. So at the top we have Hall of Famer Hoyt Wilhelm leading the parade. And I just call your attention to the stands behind the players, and I just think that's makes it look extra cool. I think Alvin Dark, of course, is there, the number 2 card. He is still with the New York Giants. He would later go on to manage the San Francisco Giants and was manager of record for the Giants' 1962 pennant winners. Jerry Coleman is appearing in an Orioles uniform, as is Eddie Waitkus. The Orioles had moved to Baltimore and changed their name from the Browns of St. Louis to the Orioles of Baltimore the year before. I think of Alex Bowman 53 whenever I see a card of Eddie Waitkus. Everybody knows the story of Eddie Waitkus being the story of his getting shot by a stalker, loosely factored into the movie The Natural and the book The Natural, Bernard Malmood's book. A great movie with Roy Hobbs being the name of the player who's based on Eddie Waitkus. Let's take a look at the next 4 cards, and I'm going to have to rearrange things a little bit to be able to do this, so I beg your pardon for that. Okay. There we go. So the next cards are kind of interesting. If you look at the card number 7, Gene Baker, Gene was one of the early black baseball players to get into the American League, which that's generally occurred for the most part later than the National League. But he has some sort of, I'm not sure whether that's a Band-Aid or a flesh-colored block of some kind. It's obviously not Gene's flesh color, but I don't know what that is, and I haven't seen or heard anything that indicates what that's all about. So if anybody knows, be sure to leave a comment. The next 4 cards include Hall of Famer Phil Rizzuto and some familiar names. Billy Bruton, the outfielder for the Milwaukee Braves. Gil McDougall, who tragically hit a line drive that crashed into Herb Score's face in 1955, and really Herb came back, but really was never quite the same after that. And of course, there's Andy Pafko, who achieved notoriety as card number 1 in the 52 Topps set. So then we have the next 4 cards. Clyde Vollmer, and I'm sorry I don't know the name of Mr. Kyriazakos. We'll just take a peek here. And Gus, pitcher for the Washington Senators. And then at the bottom, a couple of fairly well-known Boston Red Sox players, not because of necessarily their prowess on the field, although Jimmy Pearsall was a pretty good player. Pearsall wrote an autobiography called Fear Strikes Out, and in which he gave a very candid accounting of his difficulties with emotional or mental illness. In the movie of the same name, Anthony Perkins played the part of Jimmy Pearsall. Of course, he went on to be the key dual role actor in the Alfred Hitchcock's movie The Psycho. And the other player is Haywood Sullivan, who went on to become the general manager of the Boston Red Sox. Well, I'm sorry, that's not Haywood Sullivan, that's Frank Sullivan. My mistake. On the next page, we have a couple of the fighting Phillies, the Whiz Kids, Del Ennis, one of the really standout players for the Phillies during the decade of the 50s, and catcher Stan Lepata. I think, I'm not sure if I've told this story before, but among the treasures of my collection is a 1957 newspaper, the Philadelphia Inquirer, which mentions that the night before the newspaper came out, Stan Lepata hit a home run late in the game to win it for the Phillies. They didn't win a lot of games in 1957, so my Uncle Bill saved that newspaper for some reason, and at some point in time when I got interested in baseball, he gave it to me, and I still have it, and I treasure it. Also on the same page, a couple of Cleveland players, Bobby Avila and that is Al Smith, not to be confused with the Happy Warrior, and former mayor of New York City and governor of the state of New York and presidential candidate. So moving on, we come to a couple of Brooklyn Dodgers that you're familiar with. Don Hoke. He didn't come up with the Pirates, although they certainly made great use of Don Hoke in 1960 when they won the World Series. Roy Campanella there next to him. Second year card of Al Kaline, Hall of Famer. Needless to say, Roy Campanella is also a Hall of Famer. And Al Aber. And then the next two cards, Minnie Mignoso, I believe is the correct pronunciation. I guess he's trying to drag bunt, although I guess I'm not really sure how that would be done, but that's an interesting photo. I can certainly see that for a left-handed batter, and it's a little hard to picture a right-handed batter doing that. You normally, I think you would just try to push the ball up the right field line if you were trying to get a hit. The next card on the right there is Virgil Trucks, or nicknamed Fire Trucks, in a not very original nicknaming. They have Dick Cole and Preston Ward for the Pirates. Neither one of them really achieved very much notoriety. Got Hall of Famer Red Schoendienst next, along with a Bill Sarney, who was a catcher, second string catcher for the Cardinals. Johnny Temple, the outstanding second baseman for the Cincinnati Reds, and Wally Post, who was a pretty good player. And then we moved to Hall of Famer Nellie Fox and Clint Courtney, a catcher. He's been around for quite a while, I think by this time, born in 1927, so he would have been 38 years old. Bill Tuttle was an outfielder for the Detroit Tigers. Bill Tuttle is almost always pictured with a big chaw of tobacco in his mouth, and regrettably, it resulted in his death from mouth cancer due to the use of smokeless tobacco. And I believe it was his daughter and his wife that were interviewed in an article about him, and their great regret that that happened. Couple of other Hall of Famers on that page: Pee Wee Reese for the Brooklyn Dodgers, and Early Wynn. Early Wynn was an interesting name for a pitcher. He had been around for quite a while by the time he got his 300th win. I'm thinking maybe 1961 or 62. It took him a while to get it. I think he had several starts, maybe 6 or 7 as many, before he got his 300th win. So out of the big 4 Cleveland pitchers, he was the only one to get 300 wins. Below him is Vic Wertz in 19. I'm reading them to you, but I'm not showing them to you. Vic Wertz hit the ball that Willie Mays turned into the catch and the throw in the Game 1 of the 1954 World Series. So somebody said Vic Wertz hit a 400-foot long fly ball that Willie Mays caught. And later in the game, Dusty Rhodes hit a 290-foot pop fly that crossed over the fence and left field and for a home run. So, due to the unique shape and dimensions of the Polo Grounds. On the next page, we have some good players, but no Hall of Fame players. Bob Buell, I think, was somebody did some videos or a video request for good hitting pitchers. Bob Buell would not have been mentioned by anyone as a good hitting pitcher. In fact, one season I recall from looking at his baseball card, I think it might have been 1961 or 62. He batted a perfect 0-0-0 for the season. So that's Mickey Vernon, however, was a good hitter, won a batting title. In fact, 1953, he just barely edged out Al Rosen for the batting title and cost Al his chance at the Triple Crown. I mentioned Milt Bowling. This is the correct card. So it has Milt on both the front, Milt's picture on the front and Milt's name and stats on the back. Okay. Same situation here on the next page. Pretty much journeyman players. Notable, I guess, would be Billy Cox, who was traded to the Baltimore Orioles and Billy was traded from the Brooklyn Dodgers, and he was the third baseman, I believe. Over on the next page, we start off with a couple of fairly well-known Pittsburgh Pirate players. Bob Friend was a 20-game winner for some pretty bad Pirate teams in the 50s, and he stayed around long enough through the 60s to be on the World Championship team and some pretty good teams throughout the 60s. Next to him is a guy who billed himself as the original Frank Thomas. And when Frank Thomas came up in 1990, I believe, or late in 1989, 1990 was his rookie season. Frank Thomas was also played for the Phillies and was with the Phillies when he had an altercation with Richie Allen, then known as Richie Allen to the baseball card collecting world, at least. Although he was always known as Dick Allen at home. And I'm not sure how that happened, but anyway, it became so uncomfortable that one of them had to go, and since Dick Allen was on his way to being Rookie of the Year and one of the best hitters on the Phillies, it was Frank Thomas who was traded. Next to below them, you can see two Hall of Famers, Whitey Ford on the left and Enos Country Slaughter. Came over to the Yankees somewhat late in his career, but got a lot of playing time. Paul LaPalme had been a Pittsburgh Pirate and had been traded over to the Giants. And I think that picture is taken in the Polo Grounds. Kurt Simmons, by now, was one of the pitchers for the Whiz Kids and still with the Phillies in 1955. And Irv Noren, who was an outfielder and played in right field off and on for the Yankees, at least until they got traded for Roger Maris at the end of the 59 season. We have several pretty good players on the next page, and this is the end of the ash colored cards. They sort of reverse the light and dark colors on the TV set, and now from this point on they're going to be the dark on the outside and the lighter color on the inside. So there's Don Zimmer, of course, with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and George Shotgun Shuba, who is known for his handshake in a famous photograph of Jackie Robinson after Robinson had hit a home run, and Shuba was up next and greeted him at home plate and shook his hand. Lou Burdett would later go on to fame and fortune as the winner of 3 games in the 1957 World Series. And of course, Elston Howard and Don Larson are on there too. So there's, again, I keep not showing the pictures of the cards, or showing the cards, but pictures to you. And I apologize for that. I'm going to try to make an effort to not do that. On the next page, again, I know Hall of Famers, but a couple of Washington Senators, Eddie Yost, and I think it's Jerry Snyder. Brooks Lawrence, who I believe for the Cardinals. Also played for the Reds. Um, Willie Miranda, one of the early Latino ball players to break into the major leagues. Gene Freeze, I think that's Lee Walls, yeah. Cass Michaels, Steve Bilko. These are names of some of the players who, in some cases, had been around for a while. You can also see the first Joe Morgan to play for the Phillies up there in the top left-hand corner. So those are just some. And then next, we do get a Hall of Famer there in Lou Boudreau, now with the Athletics, but really achieved most of his notoriety with the Cleveland Indians. Andy Seminick was the catcher, another Whiz Kids catcher. Hank Thomas, Sal Magley with the New York Giants down there at the bottom. I'm sure all of you know that in 1955, the Brooklyn Dodgers, after 6 other tries, on their lucky 7th, they won the World Series in 4 games. And Johnny Padres, up there in the top left, was the World Series MVP, and the first time the World Series MVP was picked. And he won Game 7, was kind of a surprise starter. But nevertheless, he pitched a brilliant game, and the Dodgers beat the Yankees to win their first World Series. Next to him is stalwart infielder Junior Gilliam, Jim Junior Gilliam. Played second base, played third base, and really was a very, very terrific. And here is Jerry Coleman, still with the Yankees. My bad. Down there in the is the Don Johnson, who appears on the other error card with Ernie Johnson. We'll talk a little bit about Ernie Johnson when we get to him. And then there's Hall of Famer Eddie Matthews with the Braves. And I did it again. Solly Hamas with the Cardinals pictured there went on to manage the St. Louis Cardinals and managed for several years, and was most notable for not starting Bob Gibson, who I think probably caused him to get fired. He was a drinking buddy with Gussie Bush, so they finally got around to firing him and replaced him with Johnny Keane, his first order of business was go to Bob Gibson and tell him, said, you're my starting pitcher. And he kept his confidence in him, I think, meant a lot to Bob. And he wasn't with the Cardinals too long, because after beating the Yankees in the 1964 World Series for the Cardinals, the Yankees thought he did such a great job. Um, they fired Yogi Berra and hired Johnny Keane to manage the Yankees. It's kind of an interesting thing to happen. Vern Stevens is the first guy on the top left there. Was a great player for the Boston Red Sox, also nicknamed Junior. Granny Hamner, one of the Phillies whiz kids, and Steve Ridzik, pitcher for the Phillies. Next, we have a couple of Pirates, several Pirates there. I think that's Dick Hall. No, it's Bob Hall. But the guy next to him, Vic Janowitz, was a Heisman Trophy winner. And he apparently must have been a better football player than he was a baseball player. Roger Bowman. There's several Bowmans. Johnny Antonelli. Mike Garcia was one of the big four pitchers for the Cleveland Indians, along with Bob Feller, Early Wynn, and Bob Lemon. Now we come to Hall of Famer Rich Ashburn, along with Harvey Keene, most famously traded by the Detroit Tigers to the Cleveland Indians for Rocky Colavito. Keene had won a batting title, but he was never going to compete with Rocky's power, that's for sure. Rocky hit 4 home runs in a game once, and very few players have done that, most notably not including Mickey Mantle or Babe Ruth or Joe DiMaggio. But it did include Rocky Colavito. Harvey Keene also went on to manage the Milwaukee Brewers in their first and I think only appearance in the World Series, 1982. And the club was affectionately known as Harvey's Wallbangers. And then there's right below Harvey is Hall of Famer Bob Feller. I don't think there's any doubt that Bob Feller would have won 300 games. He might have been up there with the top 5 or 6 winningest pitchers of all time. Warren Spahn won 366 games. Feller won 266 games, but had 4 years taken out of the heart of his career due to service in the Navy during World War II. It's certainly not without the realm of possibility that he would have won 25 games a year in those 4 seasons. Davy Williams, pictured up in the top right-hand corner in a dual player card, brothers Bob Shantz and Bill Shantz. Bob was a pitcher and Bill was a catcher. And there's Bob pictured right underneath Davy Williams. And next we have Wes Westrom, catcher with the Indians. Don Newcomb, of course, a Rookie of the Year, Most Valuable Player with the Brooklyn Dodgers as a pitcher. Art Houdeman, the Cleveland Indians. Sam Mealy, who went on to manage the 1965 Minnesota Twins. And another guy that many think should be in the Hall of Fame, Ken Boyer. I'm sorry, that's not Ken Boyer. That is his brother, Cloyd Boyer. It's also not Clete Boyer. Johnny Klipstein was a relief pitcher, later with the Phillies. And here is not too much going on in the top four, but in the bottom four, there's Ernie Johnson, who pitched for the Milwaukee Braves and was, just a journeyman pitcher, but he later went on to achieve a degree of fame as a broadcaster with the TV Milwaukee or Atlanta Braves. Ernie Johnson, Skip Carey, Pete Van Wieren back in the 70s or early 80s. And he's on an error card along with Don Johnson. And next to Ernie Johnson is Gil Hodges, Hall of Famer. Another guy who certainly played a pivotal role for the Yankees during the late 50s and early 60s, Bill Skowron. I think people maybe if you've read the book My Turn at Bat, Ted Williams' book on hitting, one of his books on hitting, you may have heard me tell the story about Matt Batts and Ted Williams. Ted was in the batting cage hitting one line drive after another to left field, and Batts was leaning up against the batting cage, and Williams turned around to him and said, "You see that, Batts? I can hit the left field whenever I want to, but they don't pay me to hit the left field." So that's my story about Ted Williams and Matt Batts. Charlie Maxwell with the Red Sox. There's Sid Gordon. Up at the top. Former Red Sox pitcher Mickey McDermott. Bob Grimm, pitcher with the Yankees. And, of course, Hall of Famer Yogi Berra, who needs no other introduction. Here's Carl Furillo and Carl Erskine. Played critical roles on that 55 World Series championship team and on the Dodger pennant winners throughout the late 40s and early 50s. Joining them, Hall of Famer Robin Roberts and Willie Puddinhead Jones. Chico Carrascal with the White Sox, and Sherm Lawler, their catcher. Here's Bill Chance, also a catcher. Joe DeMaestri. And we've got a couple of pretty notable guys. On the next page, there's a second-year card of Hank Aaron. Next is teammate Johnny Logan, who was a pretty good infielder. I'm thinking maybe he was a shortstop, yeah. Eddie Mixis and a guy whose name was very similar to pitcher Jim Cott, and on one of his baseball cards, I forget which one, they actually spelled Jim Cott's name Katt. So that's Jim Cott next to Willie Mays. This is a really, really great looking card of Willie Mays. Someone once said that he liked this card because Willie's smiling. He said on most of his other cards he looks like he has constipation. That may be a little unfair to Willie, I think, but it's kind of funny. So now we come to a guy who was part of the big four pitchers for the Yankees during their run of 5 consecutive championships, Vic Raschi. The others being Eddie Lopat, Allie Reynolds, and Whitey Ford. Down at the bottom of the page, there's Bob Lemon, Hall of Fame pitcher with the Cleveland Indians, one of their big four. And there on the right is the youngest player ever to pitch in the big leagues, a 15-year-old Joe Nuxhall during the war years. And he didn't do very well in the big leagues as a 15-year-old, but he got back up to the bigs in the 50s and had a journeyman career, but really became quite well known as one of the Cincinnati Reds announcers. His most famous sign off was here's the old left-hander rounding third and heading for home. Also on this page, down at the bottom of the page, is Hall of Famer Ralph Kiner, now with the Cleveland Indians. Kiner was famously traded from the Pirates after winning his 7th consecutive home run title. He went in to ask for a raise from Pirate GM Branch Rickey before Branch Rickey went over to the Dodgers, went on to leave the Pirates. He went from the Dodgers to the Pirates. He asked him, Mr. Rickey, for a raise, and told him what he wanted. And Mr. Rickey said, he said, we finished in last place with you last year, and I'm pretty sure we can finish in last place without you. Ralph got his trade to Cleveland. Just below Ralph is, of course, Vern Law, who later won 20 games with the Pirates and won a Cy Young Award in 1960. Pretty well-known Yankee players. I'm going to start because he's first on this page with Allie Reynolds up at the top, sometimes nicknamed Super Chief, or due to his having Native American blood. Allie Reynolds had a very lively fastball, and most notably threw 2 no-hitters in 1951. Allie probably would have won 20 games several times were it not for the Yankees' penchant for not giving their really good pitchers enough starts to accumulate 20 wins. They certainly won enough games that he should have won 20 games several times. And next to him, of course, is the phenom Mickey Mantle, who even in 1955 was still trying to have his breakout year. It would not come until the next year. Um, and there's Frank Bowling with his own picture on the front of the card. We'll see later with Bob Bowling's picture. On the bottom four is a guy who always seemed to show up whenever I would start a vintage set, Rip Rapolsky. I always got Rip Rapolsky's car early. I learned this yesterday at Alex Bowman 53's Card Room Live. Frank Shea was kind of the hero of the Yankees pitching staff in 1947. But he was also the guy who was the consultant, professional baseball player to the people who made the movie The Natural. And just to try to teach Robert Redford how to look something like a baseball player instead of getting the performance like they got from William Bendix in the Babe Ruth story, who did not look like a professional baseball player, or Anthony Perkins in Fear Strikes Out later on. Smokey Burgess, certainly worth a mention. Great pinch hitter, a journeyman catcher, seemed to go back and forth with the Cincinnati Reds and the Pittsburgh Pirates, in addition to the in addition to the Phillies there. Hall of Famer George Kell, White Sox pitcher Billy Pierce, former Yankee pitcher Bob Kozava, and former Dodgers pitcher Preacher Rowe. These guys all coming down to the end of their careers with teams that they were not famous for playing for, except Billy Pierce, who did come up with the White Sox. Next, we have Joe Adcock, who up until a few years ago held the record for most total bases in a single game with 18. He hit 4 home runs and a double in a game I guess I'm trying to think of when it was. There's a 1961 Baseball Thrills card that commemorates it. I can't remember exactly what year it was. And I think it was, I'm going to say Sean Green that broke that record. He hit with 19 total bases. Awesome. Unbelievable, really. Del Crandall, catcher for the Milwaukee Braves, and played on those 2 pennant winners and 1 World Series championship teams, 57 and 58. Whitey Lockman, a guy who would go on to fame as the guy who, as the third base coach for the Giants in 1962, put the stop sign up for Matty Alou in the ninth inning, bottom of the ninth inning, just after Willie Mays' double, during Willie Mays' double, and then just before Willie McCovey crushed a line drive, but unfortunately what they used to call an atom ball, because he hit it right at him, and the M being Bobby Richardson in this case. Uh, we come to our first umpire card of the day, and that's it doesn't say what his first name was. I'm sure it's William, but I could be wrong about that. Paul Richards, manager of the Orioles. Um, Jim Constanti, who was MVP in 1950 with the Whiz Kids. Bertie Tebbetts, former big league catcher and manager. Next, we come to another coach cars, Dick Bartell. A couple more umpires. Eddie Stanky, who was manager for the Cardinals, played with the Cardinals. He's the guy who got fired before Solly Hamas got the job, I believe. And down at the bottom corner there, Billy Lowe's. He was pitcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers. And if you know the story of the 1953, I believe it was, archives set that Topps put out in the back in the, I can't remember exactly when, probably sometime in the 90s. Billy Lowe's card was not printed because he or his family didn't give Topps permission to re-release it on a commemorative card set in which he was featured in the original. Next, we come to Johnny Pesky. Johnny Pesky had been the shortstop for the Boston Red Sox back in the 40s and early 50s. He's the guy for whom Pesky Pole got its name, the foul pole in right field, due to his tendencies to hit balls straight down the line for home runs. Very short right field down the line, very deep right field to right center. Ernie Banks next to him, that's his second year card. Pretty well sought after. And then down in the lower half, we got Hank Bauer. Another umpire, Billy Gardner. Billy Gardner was now with the New York Giants, but I can't remember. I think he came up with somebody else, and I can't remember who it is now. Roy Smalley over there with the Milwaukee Braves. His son, Roy Smalley Jr., also played in the big leagues. This friend down at the bottom right corner is Owen Friend, not Bob Friend. A couple more umpires. The famous Don Mossy of Scott Reindeer Studios fame. And then some journeyman players. Now we come to a couple of Hall of Fame umpires, Al Barlick and Jim Honachek. I very clearly remember Al Barlick umpiring, not from 1955, but he umpired well into the 60s, and part of his Hall of Fame career. Jim Honachek, I think, became a chief umpire during his career. And that's John Flaherty, umpire, Joe Amalfitano. We got some more umpires here on the next page. Charlie Neal, second baseman with the Brooklyn Dodgers, and Hall of Fame umpire Paul Runge, whose son also, or Ed Runge, Paul Runge was his son, who also was an umpire. And another Hall of Fame umpire, Nestor Shylock, who definitely was the chief umpire at some point in his career. During this time period, Cal Hubbard was the chief umpire, and he's pretty famous for being known as the only member of the Baseball and Football Halls of Fame. Walt Dropo won a Rookie of the Year award for the Boston Red Sox, but never really seemed to achieve his full potential. Here's a couple more umpires. And in the bottom half, we have Tom Gorman, umpire. I think Tom Gorman's son also was a big league umpire. I saw him on a episode of the Dick Cavett Show, where he appeared with Hank Aaron, Mickey Mantle, and Alvin Dark on a kind of a panel discussion, and he was fabulous, very well spoken, had a lot of great stories. In fact, I bought his book, which I don't have here, but probably over in the bookshelf somewhere. 3 and 2. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, that's Bill Verdon. Of course, a lot of people are surprised that he's not in a Pirates uniform, but he came up with the Cardinals. And that's Coach Wally Moses who had a big league career. Another Hall of Fame umpire, Jocko Conlon. Very good third baseman for the Red Sox, Frank Malzone. And we'll come back up and catch Tommy Byrne, fireballing left-hander for the Yankees, early part of the 50s. And Lon Warneke, who had a big league career as a pitcher, pretty well thought of, and then had a subsequent career as an umpire. Bob Serve, pretty good hitting player for the Yankees. There he's that's a 1951 jersey because it's got the 50th anniversary patch of the New York Yankees on it. So another case of getting plenty of use out of the photographs. And Al Lopez, managing the Indians here, but who also managed the White Sox a little later in his career. And there's two Hall of Fame umpires, Augie Donatelli, who I remember very well as an umpire, not necessarily from the mid-50s, but he umpired well into the 60s. And here he is as a chief umpire, Cal Hubbard. And just up there at the top, Dale Mitchell, who recorded the last strikeout and last out in Don Larson's perfect World Series game, Game 5 of the 1956 World Series. Here he's pictured in an Indians uniform. And that brings us to the end of the regular issues with card number 320. Here we can see pictures of Milt and Frank bowling. Milt is on the front of Frank's card, and Frank is on the front of Milt's card. And then with their regular issue cards appearing earlier, here are Ernie Johnson cards pictured with Don Johnson, and two Don Johnson cards pictured with Ernie Johnson. So, and that brings us to the end of the 1955 Bowman set. This has been a long video. I'm sorry for that. As I said, it's a large Bowman set, not the largest by I think 4 cards, but it is just to be able to see it is challenging with the changes in horizontal and vertical presentations. So we're a little over 70 minutes. So this is going to sign off. This is Rocket Rick J 18, wishing that all your collecting dreams come true.